True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. Listen, this is a case that we have followed from the beginning that we're going to be discussing. It's Madeline Soto. Madeline Soto, beautiful young girl who at the age of only approximately 11 years old began to be sexually assaulted in the worst imaginable ways by her mother, Jennifer Soto's boyfriend. Stephen Stern. This is a case that all of us, many of us in the true crime community followed so closely, not really being able to grasp and get their mind around the fact that Madeline's mom was allowing her to sleep with her boyfriend. They were in the same bed. She allowed them to bunk together in a room privately. Ultimately, he was charged with her murder because Madeline was indeed murdered by Stephen Stearns. And the cases, interestingly, were divided. And the guest we are going to have on, I had him on previously to say, why are they dividing up these cases? Because, of course, as an FBI agent, I want all that muck, all of that nastiness in on the murder case. He said, whoa, Jen, we got to divide these up because it's just too prejudicial. So the charges were divided, and he was charged regarding all of the sexual assault, all that lewd and lascivious conduct, literally dozens of charges. He wasn't as good as Bryan Kohberger 214. He wasn't able to erase his big digital footprint, meaning Stephen Stern. So they were able to retrieve all these horrible images. I was able to get a lot of them, which I will never show. Obviously, it's disgusting how he treated this young girl really as a sex slave. In any event, the cases were divided, and what happened a few weeks ago was mind-boggling. We're going to bring on Dave Aronberg, former Palm Beach County chief prosecutor, now in private practice. He's the man. He's my favorite guy to get on here, especially regarding any Florida cases, but really regarding any case. Dave, welcome to the show. Let me get you up here.
I love your show. Thank you for having me. And it's good to be back on with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a lot about this case because I know you and I have been on it since the beginning. This was really in both of our backyards. Help us understand how in the world he is going in for a plea on all the sexual assault charges. The homicide case was due to be decided or adjudicated later. The death penalty was on the table in that case, even though it could have been on the table in the sexual assault cases because she was below the age of 12. It wasn't. And then all of a sudden we look up and he's pleading guilty to all the kit and caboodle, both charges. Help us with this.
This is how I felt after the Bryan Kohberger plea deal. This is the kind of case that the death penalty is made for. And just like in the Kohberger case, you've got a defendant who escaped the death penalty because of a plea deal. And as a former state attorney, I know the state attorney up there in this area, and I like her and I respect her. She is unequivocally opposed to the death penalty. Those are her words. She is very much opposed to it. But she also has a committee inside her office to vote on these things, and they have sought the death penalty in the past. So why didn't they pursue this case until the end? Well, I don't have that answer. I am a bit surprised because I also don't think that they're going to file charges against the mom here, even though she could be charged with aggravated child endangerment, child cruelty, child abuse because of her allowing her daughter to sleep with this cretin. So there's a lot of unanswered questions here.
All right, Dave. So let me break this down a little bit. You said you were surprised. This is the thing. In the Bryan Kohberger case, I was less surprised because I knew Bill Thompson was a plea type of district attorney. His track record showed that. There were other egregious murder cases that he was involved with, and he did not have the death penalty on the table or took it off the table. And I always believed it was a huge bargaining chip from the get-go. And this was sort of orchestrated. I understand he says, no, the defense came to him. This was a big surprise. But this case, Stephen Stearns, what he did to that girl, how in the world could this be brushed aside and put together? Is this the prosecutor's fault? And could the judge have intervened?
The prosecutor would make the decision on the charges. The judge could say, we're not going to allow this plea deal, but that's rare for a judge to say that here's a plea deal that gives this person life in prison and we're not going to allow it. We're going to force the state to try the case to get someone a death penalty. Very, very rare. And here there are reasons, like in the Koberger case, where perhaps there are some evidentiary issues. Perhaps the relatives of the victim, not talking about Jennifer because she should be in the crosshairs as well, but maybe the other relatives who didn't want to have to go through all of this. I don't know. But the judge is not going to reject that plea deal, just like the judge didn't reject it in the Koberger case, because if there was anyone who deserved it, it's these two. But getting back to the Florida law, you can seek the death penalty not only in the murder case, but also in the sexual abuse case under a new law in Florida. Now, whether that law would be found constitutional is another question, and that's another reason perhaps why the judge allowed for a plea deal. That new law that allows you to get the death penalty in a case where no one dies. We're talking about the child abuse, the child pornography, the child sexual abuse. That charge could sustain the death penalty, just like the murder charge. And I know that Madeline died, but not because of the sex abuse. That was because of the murder. And yet in Florida, you could seek the death penalty on both. Whether or not it's constitutional, though, to seek it on the instance where you have child sex abuse is still to be decided.
Right. And you and I kind of cut this up previously. You know, I was under the impression, how could this not be the perfect cookie cutter case, a case that is so egregious? It would have been the perfect sort of trial case for that type of a sentence. But you pointed out, and I thought it was a great point, Jen, listen, that homicide case that he's facing, that is just a cut and dried death penalty type case, exactly as you said it here, what the death penalty is made for. Why risk seeking the death penalty in the first charges when you can easily seek it in the second? But now they flush them both. Don't you think really when it gets down to it, it's because the prosecutor, her personal opinion about the death penalty was against it?
That may have been a factor, but she does have a committee in the office, because if she didn't, she would be treated the same way her predecessor was treated. So her predecessor, Aramis Ayala, was the state attorney in that same circuit, and she came out and said, I do not believe in the death penalty, and I will never seek it no matter what. And the governor at the time, Rick Scott, who's now a U.S. senator, said, we are now taking all death penalty cases away from you. And he sent all the potential death penalty cases to another state attorney. And then she sued Rick Scott and she lost. Now, in this case, you have Monique Worrell, who I believe worked for Aramis Ayala, but she knew enough to say, I am not taking it off the table for every instance. I'll have a committee and they will decide. Because otherwise, Governor DeSantis would have come in and removed her. Now, what's interesting is that Governor DeSantis did remove her, the state attorney, last term for other reasons, because he said she was too soft on crime. I disagreed with that. I don't think the governor should start removing prosecutors because you disagree with their policies, but the courts sustained it, and then she got elected again. So she was elected after she was removed, and the governor has not taken action. So this is the short answer to your question is this. I do not believe the reason why they eschewed the death penalty here was because of her personal opposition to it. Because if that had happened, she's opening herself up to be removed again by this governor.
Okay, I know when we talked a little bit in advance, you were yourself, how could this happen? And I guess I'm asking this question because you've been in these shoes. It's kind of like when people ask me these FBI questions, it's sort of easy in a sense for me to answer because most situations over 25 years I've been in, you were a state prosecutor in Florida for so long. Tell us, how could this happen that all of a sudden the charge was just washed away, really, the homicide charge, and he was allowed to plea?
Well, I wouldn't say, Jen, it was washed away because they got a guilty verdict. They got life in prison. I assume that he's going to agree not to appeal. So I'm sure that was part of it. And that saves a lot of time, resources when the state may have felt, okay, we're going to get what we want, get him in prison for the rest of his life. No appeals. It's over. There is no parole in Florida. So he's done. I think the policy decision is, do you then roll the dice and seek the death penalty? And there are always built-in delays when you seek the death penalty. If you get it, there are unending appeals. So this is a decision by the prosecutor. And that's why it's not just where they just, did away with the murder charge. They just decided to end the case rather than pursue the ultimate penalty. Now, you and I are on the same page. I think this case should have gone to trial to get this guy the death penalty. This guy is a disgusting sociopath, a cretin, just a filth of the earth, and yet he'll get to live the rest of his days behind bars, but he'll get to live.
Right. And I always say there's a reason why they bargained for that, right? They want to live. They realize, they can have a prison cell, they can smell the air, they can still eat, they can see people, they get married, they get lovers. I mean, it's insane what happens in prison. People think it's so bad, but the reality is they get to live and they get to enjoy some things they enjoy. Let me ask this, and you touched on this. Jen Soto, the mother of Madeline Soto, why is the mother, Jennifer Soto, not going to be charged, do you believe?
I think it's because the prosecutors don't believe they have enough evidence to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, there is evidence, though. There apparently, based on what we've seen, there's some reports that say that a detective in the case believed that the mother accepted the victimization of her daughter, and that Jennifer Soto herself told investigators that she believed that Stearns was grooming and abusing her daughter. That's powerful evidence. Otherwise, I can see why prosecutors would be reluctant. If she was a damsel in distress, she was a victim too, where you're this domineering guy. And you remember, you have that video of the two of them, I guess, at an insurance office where he is standing menacingly behind her. And I could see the defense raising reasonable doubt. And that's perhaps why the prosecution decided to just focus on Stearns.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, Dave, this is a really hard one to swallow for all the reasons we just discussed here. I want to ask you really quickly about appeal. We know that Bryan Kohberger could appeal. I'm not saying it would be successful. He has until September 3rd to make that decision under that new law. I believe it's Garza versus Idaho, actually. Is there any chance that in this case there could be an appeal based on anything to do with the Sixth Amendment right, like was the argument with Garza?
Now, I believe when it comes to Kohberger, just like Stearns, they have both waived the rights to appeal. That's a reason why prosecutors agreed to the deal and why the judge said, okay, we're going to allow it. Because I can't imagine that the prosecutors here would allow this guy to appeal his conviction and then have to put the families through all this again. It is interesting what you're saying, that the Garza versus Idaho case, right? That's the case you're saying, the U.S. Supreme Court case, that it could still allow for an appeal if the defendant says that their attorneys were ineffective assistance of counsel. So perhaps that is the narrow path, but it's hard. I mean, they didn't go to trial. Usually ineffective assistance of counsel is when you went to trial and your lawyer screws up. It's not when you had a plea deal that you went on the record, you said, yes, I'm aware of everything that happened, and I still am pleading guilty. That's hard to argue that it's your lawyer screwing up. It sounds like it's on you.
Right. And you said narrow path. is there any narrow path? Is there even, a whisper of a path for Stephen Stern to appeal?
I don't think so. I think he's done. He's in prison the rest of his life. We'll see if he lives his life in prison, because the lowest form of life inside of a prison is apparently a baby killer, and he may meet the same prison justice as others, like who's the Jeffrey Dahmer, for example. Now, I'm not condoning or sanctioning that kind of stuff. I mean, you and I believe in the criminal justice system. You were in the FBI, and I was a state prosecutor. So we try to do justice above board in the system, in the process, and not count on the underground system of justice to take care of people. But it is a reality that that kind of thing happens.
Yeah, it certainly is. And he would be ripe for that reality as well, just from our experiences and what we've seen and what we've watched and who's been targeted. But let me ask you this. Will he be in general population? I honestly don't know where he is right now, if he's in SEG or Gen Pop.
That's going to be a decision by the state. The state prison agency will have that entire authority to make that decision. Now, I do believe, because of the high profile nature of the case and because of the crimes that he committed, that he will be segregated at least somewhat, but it doesn't mean that someone can't get to him. I mean, we've seen this before. We may see it again. And already Brian Koberger is already pleading with the warden to get him into a different area because he's allegedly the victim of sexual harassment. Oh my goodness. So these guys are in for a rude awakening. They're real tough when it comes to destroying the lives of innocent people who are sleeping, like in Koberger's case, or babies, young children who can't defend themselves. We'll see how they like it when they're people their own size or bigger in the prison with them.
Yeah, that you know what though, prisons have gotten much kinder and gentler over these decades. When I look back in the early 90s, when I started my career until now, reading all of these little, he's picking on me. I'm not getting all my food and they're withholding my nutritional needs. Unbelievable that any of this is entertained. Kinder and gentler.
You imagine, I mean, you've seen it all at the FBI. You imagine you've got a serial killer saying, "I heard a mean word from my a cellie. They're threatening sexual violence against me." Oh my gosh, like he thinks he's still in the safe space of his university, where he can write a letter to the dean and have a 7-day recess to get his mental health back together. It doesn't work like that in prison. He thinks he's at the 4 seasons. In prison, there are no 4 seasons. There's 1 season, and it's not a comfortable one.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm so irritated with that case. I can barely talk about it anymore. It's one of those cases that I just want him to go away. I know everybody wants these documents, hundreds of pages. I'm sitting on hundreds, over 500 pages right now that I still haven't read. I try to go through one document a day, and people, because of that gag order for 2.5 years, they want to know the details. And it's interesting, Dave, just to not digress too much, but on that case, I just read a report where Dylan Mortensen said that Brian Koberger said Kaylee,
Yeah.
the name Kaylee. And I think something like, "I'm here for you," or "Kaylee, it's going to be okay," whatever those words were. And now you have the chief of the Moscow Police Department saying, "Yeah, that was never said." It's one of these situations where I tell you, it's unbelievable to watch these police reports and see how they don't line up. And that's the whole reason why, as you know, you don't present police reports in trial. You have somebody get up on the stand and reflect on what they heard, what they said, if they were wrong. And so it's been irritating a little bit for me going over these reports and having everybody bicker back and forth about what the truth is.
Yeah, it's hearsay. You got to have someone testify, does not read from a report. Although it is allowed in grand juries, you can read and bring up hearsay in grand juries. So it's much easier to indict someone through a grand jury than it is to convict someone at a trial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason that some of these things are just interesting is, of course, people are trying to say, and I've always believed there was some connect with Maddie and Kaylee. They were targeted. Brian Coburg, but he erased so much that we're hearing about from the digital experts. I don't think we're ever going to get to the true bottom of it. Although you would think, even if it's just on his end, if it ever connected with their end, we could get it from their standpoint. But it seems like they just threw up their arms and they said, we can't solve that picture.
We still don't know the why. And perhaps if you knew Kaylee's name, that tells you maybe he was targeting her. Well, we don't know. And that's something that disturbs a lot of us, is that Koberger will take secrets with him to his grave. So he got the benefit of a plea deal without having to give up what the public wants, which is to know the why. So that's one reason why I was disappointed in the outcome.
Real quickly, Dave, we're going to make this a pretty quick hit, if you will. But when it comes to that plea deal, and in the Bureau, never have seen anything like that. When you pled guilty, you had to give up the farm. That meant days and days spent with an FBI agent talking about when you were first born up until, that you had a memory up until that crime, and going through everything that happened. And also where, in this case, where the knife would have been, where the bloody clothes would be, what you used to cover yourself to, conceal that evidence. Have you ever seen in Florida a plea deal that did not include coming up with the goods for the guy?
It depends on the strength of the evidence. It depends on a lot of factors. Not every plea deal requires the defendant to allocute, to be able to say everything that happened, to explain the motivations. But in a case like Koberger, where it got international attention, where you had him dead to rights, and you gave him a gift by letting him live instead of face a death penalty, I think that's a case where you needed to get more out of him. So although it is not unprecedented to avoid the whole motivation, it is the wrong decision, I think, in this case, because this is what everyone was waiting for, and it just feels so unsatisfying not to get it.
Right. And let's bring that over to Stephen Stern too. I mean, I didn't see any details about exactly when she died, other than from the evidence, him say, yes, I killed her that night, which is what most of us think. And then, laid in bed with her, and then, later discarded her, or just the horrible details here. But we didn't get to hear him allocute either.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing is, with Koberger, they didn't even have him speak. They just had him answer questions very coldly, yes. And like, that's it. So yes, I do think that these cases are similar in that way, where they feel unsatisfying. I would have liked to learn more about how he killed Maddie, although we get the sense of what happened based on the time frame. We know more about Maddie's death and her victimization than we do about what happened in the Koberger case. But point taken, we still don't know everything.
Yeah, and I think it also was interesting, Dave, with her, that when he did speak, meaning Stephen Stern, oh my gosh, that was no confession. That was no remorse. It was sickening to sit and listen to that, almost like somebody else did it.
You know what? You're so right about that, Jen. It makes me angry thinking about it. You're right. That guy, he deserves the worst. He is so despicable, and yet in his own mind, he still professes that he cared for Maddie, and it would outrage me if I were a relative there. It should outrage the mother, Jennifer, but she doesn't seem to care as much.
Yeah. What did you make of the fact that she wasn't even there, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, there you go. That's what I mean. I mean, she wasn't even there. She was allegedly involved. We don't know. We don't know for sure, but it just is weird that you had this this older man, sleeping in the same bed with your daughter, and you just were that clueless, or you just turned a blind eye. Either way, it could warrant a criminal prosecution. It's just that the prosecutor's there, and I get it. They have all the evidence, we don't, but they have to believe in good faith they can get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. And apparently they don't. Now, it's not, we thought maybe it's because they needed her to testify against Stearns at trial, but when then he took the plea deal, that went out the window. So I don't know. This is why has not been a great year for prosecutors. You know, you combine these two cases with the Diddy case, and now you see what happened in New York today with the overturning of Trump's verdict. So there's a lot of it's tough time for prosecutors. There've been better years for my old profession.
Yes, Dave. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. For those who don't know, there's an active shooter situation in Villanova, purportedly at mass for the freshmen that were incoming and then possibly, uh, migrated over to the library. That's the last I heard. News Nation is covering it extensively. I want to thank you, Dave Aronberg. You always come on and just really provide such an interesting outlook and so much experience that you bring. And I thank you for tackling this hard questions, which I think both of us just can't answer.
Yeah, and that is part of the frustration is that as a prosecutor, as an FBI agent, you want to be able to provide answers for people. You want to be able to do full justice. But in the real world, justice can be fleeting, it can be slow, and you sometimes have to take what you can get.
Yeah. Dave, please tell the audience where they can find you.
You can find me online. I do videos for Legal AF. It's part of the Midas Touch Network. I also do videos. I'm a contributor to MK True Crime. That's Megyn Kelly's new true crime network. I do videos there, and I'm managing partner of Dave Aronberg Law. So we're a litigation boutique. We do civil and criminal law. And Jennifer, I love being on your show, and not just this show. I love being on with you on News Nation or wherever we go. It's always fun because you and I see eye to eye a lot. It's good to know that there's people like you are unafraid to speak up and speak out.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And have a great evening. And I'll be calling you again. Thanks for being such a great friend of the show. And until next time, may justice be served, Dave.
Thank you. Great.
Everyone, Dave Aronberg, I mean, I've said it before. He's my favorite prosecutor. He's the man. Such a smart guy, and I've really enjoyed the time in Idaho when we were in the investigative stage. For about a year, he and I were on Cuomo a lot together, and that's really where I got to know him. And it was great just bouncing information off of one another and getting into all that evidence. He's just the perfect one to talk to about cases because he's been there. He did the job forever as a prosecutor. And so anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the show, and I'll be reading all the comments. I'm going to get off now because of this active shooter incident at Villanova. Need to get caught up on that. And I almost had to postpone this show. I did a quick hit with News Nation, and so going to be standing by for that this evening. But hopefully we don't have any fatalities. Hopefully they get this guy under control. There was a Chattanooga false alarm where they actually put everybody on lockdown. They sent out a active shooter alert, and thankfully they came back and said, listen, it ended up being false. I'm not hearing any of that, at least before I got on the show here. So again, thank you all for joining, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Till next time, may justice be served.